Welcome back to the Speaking and Communicating podcast. I am your host, Roberta. If you are looking to improve your communication skills, both professionally and personally, this is the podcast you should be tuning into. By the end of this episode, please remember to subscribe, give a rating and a review. Now, most of us struggle with injecting humor into our keynote speeches, into our business presentations. For myself, I struggle. And my guest today, she's going to tell us exactly what it is that we need to do in order to improve that aspect of our speeches and presentations. Before I go any further, please help me welcome Jen McInnis. She is a keynote speaker and a comedian. Hi, Jen.
Hi, Roberta. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you for being on the show. Welcome. And tell us, first of all, in which part of the U.S. are you in?
Right now, my stuff is in Los Angeles. My body's kind of all over the place, but that's where I'm based.
Oh, you're a nomad. Okay, so you're in LA right now. Okay, so tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, thank you. I'm a keynote speaker, comedian, comedy writer, and author. And I've sold comedy material to everyone from Jay Leno's Tonight Show monologue to radio stations and award shows, and also keynote speaking all around the country for the last 25 years, comedy and keynote speaking. My keynotes are humor keynotes, but they have a great information. My most popular one is Finding the Funny in Change.
And I've also we've had a lot of changes recently.
Yeah, one or two. Yeah, and I've also written 2 books. So
okay, and so you've written for Jay Leno.
Yeah, I've sold freelance. So what he did years ago, he had a this is dating me. He had a fax machine, and as a comedian,
that shows how old we are.
Yeah, I know what that is. That technology that came and went in our lifetime, isn't that weird? And
it went so fast. I had a fax number even. Yes,
I was in doing a temp job right after college when I saw the first fax machine, and we all gathered around it. And it was a sales company. And we were watching it. We're like, oh my gosh, Joe is in Kansas. Here comes the fax. It was so weird. Now it's, oh gosh, that's so old. But so years ago, he used to have a fax number, and you had to jump through a few hoops as a comedian, but then you could get the fax number, get approved, get the fax number, and fax in jokes. So then you would either see him on TV, or you get the check in the mail, and you could call his assistant and find out which joke it was. So I did a lot of freelance jokes, and that was a lot of fun. I was actually ran into his head writer, because a lot of comedians did this, and I ran into his head writer backstage at a comedy club a few years ago, and he's like, "Oh, Jan McInnis," he said, "you're one of the comedians we actually read the jokes." So, so I was felt very flattered that he kind of recognized the name.
So you wrote jokes good enough to bypass other comedians who had sent in their entries, and so some of the jokes we loved that you had written that he said on TV on his monologue.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's fun. And I've written for radio. I've written for hundreds of radio stations because, a disc jockey gets in the morning and they need stories. It's 4 a.m. And so they subscribe to a prep service and they'll get, news stories and jokes and things like that. And so I've written for those. So I'd be driving around the country and I'd hear a DJ say a joke, and I'm like, oh, I wrote that.
Wow, that's such a good feeling.
Yeah.
And so you left college and went straight into comedy?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, I wanted to. I was never the class clown, but I always wanted to thought comedian would be kind of fun, but I didn't know how to do it. Nobody in my family is in entertainment. So when I graduated from college, I remember the night of graduation at dinner with my parents and my family, and we're having this nice dinner, and I'm thinking, now is not the time to tell him I want to be a comedian. So I went into a marketing career for about a dozen years back in the Washington, D.C. area. And I, always kind of wanted to be a comedian still, and finally got the nerve to try it. And it worked. Got hired off of one of my first open, and started working comedy with the marketing career. And finally, after a couple of years, I left the marketing. And for a while there, when I left the marketing, went full time into comedy, my marketing was better than my act. Because I knew how to do marketing. I knew how to promote myself. So finally, luckily, my act caught up and has surpassed my marketing now.
You know what? I always say this: there's always a minute when you need to start. Don't wait until you're perfect. And it's gonna improve as you do it.
Right. Get as prepared as you can. And you'll know when the jumping off time is. You'll get a sense for when you need to leave. I know people leave too soon. Some people stay forever and never leave. Some people wait too late and miss the whole boat. I actually had a couple of starts and stops. I got on stage in a comedy club in the 80s, which was the boom, the big, you know, comedy. There was comedy on every street corner, and you could make a lot of money just in a small radius. And I got on stage once and kind of freaked out. It was the lights and everything, but I did really well. But I left that night, and one of the professional comedians came up and said, "You've got to do this again. You have to." And I was so freaked out. I waited 8 years before I got back on stage. I missed the whole comedy boom.
Even though he gave you encouragement.
Yeah, and I had a great show. It was so scary. And waited 8 years, I got back on it, and yes, a few starts and stops, but finally made it into comedy. Then went from comedy to corporate comedy. So all I knew was comedy clubs, working comedy clubs, which was great. I really enjoyed them. But in my day job, I had hired the Capitol Steps, which is a comedy singing troupe out of DC. And I remember watching them at this banquet and thinking, well, I wonder if there's other banquets that would use comedy. And I would ask around my friends, and they were like, no, there's just Christmas parties. It's not really. That I kept thinking, no, there's got to be some corporate and convention comedy. And finally, I got a few opportunities and moved into that. I capitalized on those. I was always a clean act anyway. Moved into that, and then did that for years. And then at one point, I think it was around 2008, people started saying, hey, we want comedy, but we really need a message too. And I was like, okay.
Right.
So I put together some humor keynotes, which had lots of comedy, but lots of also great tips. And I moved into keynote speaking. So kind of a roundabout way. I'm doing a career I never knew existed. I'm a keynote speaker.
Keynote speaker with comedy.
Yeah.
And then speaking of when you said you were with your parents after graduation and you couldn't tell them you're going to comedy, you remind me of, so me being a South African, Trevor Noah is my homeboy.
Oh yeah, he's great.
Thank you. I love him as well. So his grandma, when he first started doing his show, before he came to the Daily Show, he used to say, oh, guess what, Granny? I'm doing so well. Do you have a job? He said, yes. He said, do you have an office? He says, no. He said, then you don't have a job. Because in grandma's mind, the real job is when you have an office and actually sit there on a desk and do some work. This thing of standing and making people laugh, it did not make sense to her.
It did, most people, it's a hard leap because it is such an odd thing, and we kind of wait for permission. Someone's going to tell me it's okay to do this, and you're going to wait a long time if you wait for that. You got to just kind of try it. Not try it, do it. Just jump off and do it once you're ready. And once you're as prepared as you can be with the day job you have, then you just need to make that decision and move in.
Right. Does it discourage you when you start on those comedy clubs, those open mic platforms, does it discourage you when the guests, the audience don't laugh at quite a good number of your jokes?
Well, when you start out, you get a lot of that. But as it moves on, usually you don't get so much. But now you also gauge the crowd. Like, I know my first few jokes are great. If they kind of laugh down here instead of up here, I go, okay, that's the way they are. And they just different groups laugh, differently. Some groups are more reserved. If you have, I don't want to bash any group. Accountants are a little quieter. They kind of analyze the joke a little bit,
Right.
So if you look at, you get, so I know that. So I go in and I go, okay, that's the way they are, and have fun with it. Have fun with it. Most people are having a good time. You just may not get the taking the roof off the place that you have in the past.
Do you feel that when you start off, what are some of the things that you can do just to warm up the room before you get into the material? Obviously, you're prepared. You know your material. You know where you're going with this. But what are some of the things you can do just to warm the crowd up, to warm up to you, and break down that barrier?
I do ahead of time. I always have a client call, so I find out about the group, and so I find a couple of things I can connect with them on when so I can get on stage and have some fun with some of the stuff they've been sitting through, some of what's been going on with their day or their convention, and kind of point out some stuff like that. And that's a nice way to kind of get things rolling with the crowd. And then I go in and with my keynotes, and I'll go into some humor, and then I move into some tips, and then back and forth humor and tips, that sort of thing.
Right. I watched one of your videos where you talk about your nephew, and you guys had been to a restaurant, and then the bill came for $50. He said, Dad, you let her have it. It's 50 bucks. And you said he was voicing out something that was in a lot of other people's minds on the table, which we tend to do. We there's a lot that's going on, and if somebody comes, to a public platform and says already what we're thinking, they'll be like, yeah, I was thinking that too.
A lot of comedians do that. We talk about getting the big elephant out on the table.
Right.
And I talk about, that's one technique in business humor that you can use to find humor fast. With comedians, that's how we start. As a comedian, if you're really tall or really overweight, or you have a noticeable disability, or you look like a famous comedian, you need to say something about it right away. Otherwise, people won't pay attention. Sort of like in business, if you've just had some big change, some big thing happen, and you sit down to a staff meeting and you're not going to talk about it, everyone's still thinking about it. They're not going to pay attention to what you say. So you kind of have to use a little bit of humor to kind of get that out. And comedians are good with the sort of what's the first thing you see, what is on everyone's mind when you get on stage, so that you can have some fun with it and move on and kind of clear the air and point out what's going on and move on.
So say, for instance, something as serious as COVID, which we've been going through in the last 2 years, would some people in the audience think, hey, if you make a joke, if you stand out there and say, wow, everybody's just distancing and wearing this mask, what are we going to do? We can't even see each other's faces. Would some people think that's gone a little too far? This is serious, and you think that you think there's a joke in this when people are dying? You know how sometimes people respond.
Well, I'd have to say that pretty much any subject, you can find some humor. You can't maybe talk about COVID. It was very serious. You can't joke about that, but you can joke around COVID, like what we look like wearing masks, or what we look like 6 feet, apart. You can have some jokes around the subject. You don't make fun of COVID, because you're right, people did die. So don't shy away if you want to say something. But I would also say, watch the overdone stuff. I mean, people have heard about COVID. They've heard a lot of COVID jokes. I mean, so I would stay away from those anyway, because they're very overdone. I tell people,
Right.
I did a show for 500 blind merchants, and they said they put in my contract, you cannot do any blind jokes, because they've heard them all, and they had a very great sense of humor, but they've heard them all. So watch the overdone subjects, but most subjects you can't maybe not talk about it, but you can talk about the things around it. You can talk about the weight gain you gained because of sitting at your house for 2 years eating ice cream. You can talk about things around it. You just can't make fun of COVID. It was very serious, I think, in my opinion.
I hear you, that it's around it and not the actual subject, which brings me to, but some comedians like Chris Rock, they actually, the very thing they are told. I remember, I don't know if you know the Justice Smollett story. He used to be on a TV show called Empire, and there was
something, right?
Something about a hate crime around him or something. He got beat up. So it had just happened, and I think it was the BET Awards, but Chris Rock was hosting something. And the very first thing he said, the elephant in the room again, the very first thing he said was, I have just been told no Justice Smollett jokes. And then the moment he said that, he go, what the hell was he thinking? And he starts joking about the very thing he was told not to do. That's exactly what he does.
And that's the difference in star power. You've hired Chris Rock. You're gonna get Chris Rock, because you're not gonna tell Chris Rock what to say and what not to say. Me, you hired me. You can probably tell me you can't say that. But Chris Rock, you know the kind of comedian. He's hilarious, and he's gonna say what is going on in the world, and you can't tell him what not to say. That's the beauty of comedy clubs in general. Corporate's a little different. You really have to stay away from some subjects if you're like me and not well known. But comedy clubs and venues like that, you get the comedian saying what they want. They're free. It's live. It's in the moment, and
no cancel culture.
There's. I think you're getting a live show with the person you came to see, and you should take it for what it is. That you go into Chris Rock show, if you walk out offended, you kind of went, what Chris Rock talks about. And
Right.
if you don't like the subjects, you don't like the news stories, you don't like his take on it, that's fine. But I don't think you should be offended. I think you're going in to see that Chris Rock. If you go in to see an unknown comic and they go off, maybe you were side blinded by something that you didn't realize. But I don't know. I'm on the side of the comedian. I think you say what you want in comedy clubs, and in big theater venues, and people know you, and you're
They know
allowed to
what
say
to expect
they know
and
what
what
to
they signed
expect it,
up
and
for.
you're paying for a live show. You may not like it. Okay, people don't like all sorts of things. As comedians, you might not like a joke just because you don't think it's funny. You might not like a joke because you don't like the subject. There's all sorts of reasons not to like a joke, but comedians are allowed to say it.
Can't please everybody. And then when it comes to business presentations, speaking of the elephant in the room again, is it, when you say you can use that, if something changed in the workplace, give us some examples. What can we do? Let's say there's something that has just happened and it's on everybody's mind.
Well, I would say you have to sit down and use some humor with it and have some fun. You can bring it out easy ways. You could make a top 10 list of things we wish this hadn't happened, or how we're going to deal with this. Have some fun with it. Good news, bad news. Some of those things to kind of get the big elephant out and let people know. Okay, she or he knows what we're dealing with. But you can use some humor in those and get people laughing that way.
Because the worst thing you can do is like ignore. Ignoring
I think if you've had
not...
something big that is on everyone's mind, and you're going to sit down and you're not going to talk about it at a staff meeting or something, I think you're going to lose people. I think so. Humor is a fast way to address it and move on.
Right. And then what about, so when you do keynotes, we talk a lot in this podcast about storytelling, always have a story. People will remember the story, not the technical concept you talk about. In the story, I find that I may tell the story, I still struggle with injecting humor, the right kind of humor, the right amount of humor. What is it that we are missing, and what can we do to improve on that?
Well, there's humor all around us. We just got to look for it. Pull out the ironies. What are the disconnects, the things that don't make sense? Have some fun with that. You can add humor to your story. I'll send you one of my books.
Oh, yes,
my
please.
book on writing humor, finding the funny fast.
Yes.
Yes, but I think the stories are important. But I think people will remember you if you're funny and you make them feel good. I just did an event last week, and the speaker ahead of me got a great response. I did not hear her keynote, but when I walked in the room, someone pulled me over and said, "You're not going to make people cry again, are you?" And I said, "Well, if I do, I'm doing it wrong." So some people want to get an emotion out by telling a really sad story. That's not me. I don't do the sad stories. I do a few stories, funny things, short stories, and lots of jokes. Because I think the feeling, what do they say? Information plus emotion equals retention. So if you give people an emotion like humor and some information, they will remember.
Because usually when we talk about storytelling and the emotional attachment to whatever it is you're talking about, it's usually I can relate. Oh, I had a similar experience. That's what we usually focus on.
Yeah.
Humor, the emotion, the laughter we don't talk about it so much.
Right. And you'll remember, you might not remember my name, but you'll walk away going, "Oh, that was funny and refreshing." And you change the energy and gives you a little bit more energy. And so for me, I like doing humor more than any serious sad stories.
So you can have an irony, a punchline, like, as comedians, that's what you do. There's that pause before the irony or the punchline comes in.
Yeah, you do a setup punchline for me. And you just set up, and comedians are master communicators. We give you, like, if you go to see Chris Rock, you kind of know what his humor is about, so you kind of know what you're going to get. For me, no one knows who I am, so I've got about 60 seconds to make people laugh when I get on stage because they don't know anything about me. So I have to get a lot of information over in the setup line so that people get the punchline. Because I don't do long stories; I do quick, 3 or 4 jokes a minute. So what we do with comedians, a couple things, we will repeat the main thing we want you to know in the setup line. I became an aunt again. Now that my sister has kids, I've said that I'm an aunt twice, and then I go into the joke. So I'm talking about being an aunt. And we repeat it, and we do it in short sound bites. We don't do it like a lot of information at once because that's too much. I'm an aunt and I have a niece and nephew. That's too much information in one sentence. So short sound bites and repeat it.
Mm-hmm. And do we, at the start of, let's say I'm doing a business presentation, if I feel like, okay, I'm not good like Jen, I don't know how to make a joke out of my material, should I do the doctor and the judge walk into a bar kind of jokes? Are they lame?
To me, they're lame. You know what I do instead?
I love that.
My sister actually one time in college started off with a joke. She said, my dad told me to start off all my speeches with a joke so you can get people laughing. I don't know any jokes, and that got a big laugh. So
there you go.
No. She said, but I've never listened to my dad's advice yet. So, and it got a big laugh. So, talking about the fact that you don't do humor, you can also add in, I'd say, cartoons, and as long as you've got the rights, there's places you can buy cartoon rights from that show people you have a sense of humor, without funny quotes that show people you have a sense of humor. Can help you along the way if you don't know. Taking something as simple as idioms, things that that's not people in Congress. That's our those are sayings that we know, like what's I got a couple of idioms right on my tip of my tongue.
It's like if somebody says the cat's out of the bag.
Yes, idioms that people know, like little sayings that people know. You can change those around. Rome was not built in a day. That's an idiom. Change it around. Rome was not built in a day, and I don't know. Change it around. So those are really fast ways to change and to add some humor into your speech. So look up idioms and then just change them. People are familiar with them. They recognize them. And then you put a little twist as if something funny at the end. Rome was not built in a day, and neither was this keynote. That's why I don't have any jokes.
That's a good one. You just come up with this, right?
Yeah. Wow. I did. I was thinking.
Wow. That's amazing. And then what about self-deprecating humor? Do you think it's harmful? Because, we listen to all this self-improvement stuff and we want to tell ourselves positive things and affirmations. Is it good to use self-deprecating humor and laugh at ourselves?
I think so. You don't want to be mean to yourself, but I have big feet. I talk about my size 12 AAA shoe. So, and people connect. After the shows, they always like, oh, I've got a size 10, and where do you shop, and that sort of thing. So certainly find something self-deprecating. Also, don't make fun of a group you're not a member of. If you're bald, you can have fun with bald people. If you're not, don't. If you're 10 pounds overweight, you could talk a little bit about trying to get rid of that last 10 pounds. If you're not, don't. Nobody wants to hear skinny chick talk about losing weight.
No, that's me. Yeah.
Only make fun of a group you are a member of, and then you can
because that's still an element of self-deprecating. Because you also talk about yourself if you're part of that group,
and you're connecting, right? If you're part of that group, so if you're a woman, you can have fun with women. If you're African American, you have fun with that. If you're not, don't do it. And if you just want to stay on the safe side. I mean, again, Chris Rocks of the world can say whatever the heck they want, but those of us that are not Chris Rock famous, we got to be a little more cautious.
Yeah, just like me, I don't have kids, so I can't say something funny about motherhood or something. Yeah.
Right. I joke about my nieces and nephews a lot. I don't talk about motherhood because I've never had a kid. I do joke about,
about being an aunt, because that's the joke. One of the jokes that I said, yes, you joked about being an aunt. So that's also back to you. Instead
joke about what you know. Joke about what you know. What do you do? Are you on some weird diet? Do you never eat ice cream? Do you just joke about the stuff? Do you run 20 miles a day? I mean, what are the things have some fun with that. You'll connect with people. A lot of people do a lot of the same things.
And then when it comes to those in leadership positions, I think that a lot of the time there's this myth that, if I'm in a leadership position, in order to be taken seriously, my subordinates are not going to respect me if I'm cracking jokes. I should always be business, and you should.
I think they respect you more if you show a little bit of vulnerability with some humor. and show your human side if they respect you a little bit more. And again, you're not talking as anyone in business. You're not trying to be a comedian. You're not popping off with 20 minutes of jokes. You're popping off with funnier, haha. Just sort of let people take a breath, take a breath and change the energy a little bit. You're not trying to be Chris Rock. So, you know, you so leaders should, I think they should show their vulnerable side. I've had leaders actually. I've joked around with them. Usually, people in leadership positions, I can joke on, I can have fun with, not mean, but just. And one guy I recall vividly coming up to me later and saying, "Thank you for having fun with me. I looked more human to my staff." And
Wow.
he was really happy about it. So as long as I'm not mean, I'm not going to go up there and say, "Hey,
No.
look at the leader. He's wearing a funny shirt, or he's bald, or But you're going to have some fun maybe with his policies or something he's said or done, or what he likes to golf. Is he a bad golfer? Is he a good golfer? Find, and you get all that when I do an interview ahead of time with my clients, and I find out about the group and the people in it, and then I can find some fun, tasteful humor that people will go, because laughter is about a connection. It's not just about
Mm-hmm.
finding something so funny people laugh. They connect and laugh. Oh yes, we get it. How many, I'm doing the baby boomer comedy show now, and people connect when you talk about baby boomer stuff because they think it's funny because they lived through it, riding without
Right.
helmets, bicycles without helmets, things like that. They connect, and that makes it funny.
Mm-hmm. Relatability. And that's when your audience connects with you, that's one. Obviously, they're not going to forget your message or you.
Right.
And like I said, like you said, it's going to be something that they say, you know what, this was really enjoyable. They might not remember the technicalities of what you talked about, but
Right.
it's really
But
something that they enjoyed sitting
they
through.
enjoy, and I'm brought in a lot of times when the conferences are, I do everything from healthcare, education, financial. They've had heavy, heavy, heavy content. And so they need something to lighten it up, the little lighter content, but still some good usable tips. But also some way to just kind of relax, laugh a little bit, and
Mm-hmm.
recharge.
At Toastmasters, they say stay away from sex, religion, politics, because those are the topics that,
Yeah.
can go either way. You can offend people. You don't know which group belongs to who. So it's better to
Oh
just stay
yeah.
away from those. Do you feel that, like you said, so in comedy clubs, can you at least cross over that line? Is it a little safer to do that?
Yeah, I think you can say in comedy clubs, they're paying you to be funny. I mean, that's the
Right.
one rule. They're paying you to be funny. And if you're funny, then you're fine. I know comedians who are right wing and left wing comedians, and they go out there, and I know comedians who cross all over the lines and make fun of both.
Mm-hmm.
In comedy clubs, it's way more free. And you've got to be funny. You can be dirty, you can be clean, you can be religious, you can be whatever it is, but you got to be funny.
Right. And so let's talk back to the comedians, right? And cancel culture. We have Dave Chappelle. I think he was about to be canceled for a joke he made about transgender people.
Uh,
And like you said, if you are not part of the group, maybe that's why it's sometimes you should think twice about making fun of a group you are not part of.
I don't remember the joke, and I did not pay much attention to that.
Mm-hmm.
If he was trying to make we get a lot of our news from the late night TV shows that are funny,
Right,
and
right.
so he's giving information. Is he taught? I don't know what he was saying. I don't remember what it
I,
was, and
I, I don't know
I
what
will
it was,
not get
but
into it
it
either.
just blew up on the news and Twitter, and you know how
Yeah,
social media just that has become a new news source, so to
yeah. Well, a lot
speak.
of stuff is taken out of context. So unless you're in
Mm,
the room and you saw the whole thing, and he really went and I just can't comment on it because I wasn't there that
yeah.
night. And that's the problem with comedians now, that people are taking little clips of what they said and putting it out there, or even comedians are having trouble, famous ones, trying out new material because somebody puts a clip of that. And it's like, and
Yeah.
it's not funny because your first time saying it sometimes isn't funny. And, if you're just trying to work on something and someone says, "Oh my gosh, look what he or she said," that's not really fair to the comedian. 20 years ago, when you saw a comedian, you saw that they had not been all over Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, and so you're seeing their jokes that they've done behind the scenes in workout clubs for years,
Mm-hmm.
and they're polished. Nowadays, you're seeing comedians unpolished, and they're trying stuff out. So we're rushing to judgment on some of that. But I really don't know much or will comment much on the Dave Chappelle thing. I didn't. I feel
Yeah.
like if you
Maybe.
went to see him and it's live performance. Whatever happened in there, it's a live performance, and comedians have a little more latitude to say things.
Because it also relates to the very famous Chris Rock incident at the Oscars.
Oh,
so
yeah.
he makes a joke about a disease, first of all, he didn't know existed. And secondly, that he didn't know Will Smith's wife had that disease. So he was just, and G.I. Jane was a great movie in the 90s. I remember watching it. I was,
yeah, it was.
Yeah. So
yeah, I'm on the side of the comedian. I just feel you're a star, celebrity. Like I said, people in power, they come there knowing they're going to be poked at. I mean,
right.
That's part of the gig. It was a joke. It didn't even register with me. I was like, oh, that's different. I don't, it didn't make me mad or happy or either way. I didn't really think much of the joke when he said it. And violence is just never the answer. If you're mad about something, you would have made it better if you had stormed out of the room and let him know it. But even that, again, you're in this position of celebrity. May not be fair. I've never been a celebrity that people can poke at you, and make fun of you. I don't know.
But you fair game, because I mean, you Ricky Gervais, the British one.
Oh yeah.
When they ask him to host them, he roasts all of them. Tom Hanks, Spielberg, you name it, everybody's fair game.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
He's funny. Yeah,
he's very funny, and he goes in for the kill, the very things that everybody's afraid to say. The elephants in the room.
He does. Yeah,
you hear about in this documentaries and scary things. He goes all out. He is not afraid of any subject or anybody for that matter.
And we don't want to start a precedence with hitting people because you don't agree with what they said. They said something that you don't like,
Because then after that incident, then everybody's asking, are comedians safe? Are they safe not just from violence, but are they safe to tell the jokes they wanted to tell when they prepare? Because now are people going to come and slap you as well?
Right.
Is that where we're going with this? Because I remember growing up, we used to watch American sitcoms and TV shows and be like, oh, they make fun of the president. Oh my goodness, so free. That's what they say about him. Oh my God, Americans are really free, right? So to us, it was this freedom, this level of no filters. Everybody understands it's a joke. So the president of the country is not going to put you in jail just because you made fun of him.
Right. Yeah. I did have one, I have to say I had one corporate event probably 10 or 15 years ago. And I talked to the committee ahead of time, and they had were giving me great information. And I got on stage and I did not realize their CEO was from a different country. And I made jokes about the company. It was a very funny company. I can't say what it was, but it was very funny. And it had to do with maxi pads. Okay.
Oh, okay.
I didn't make a lot of maxi pad jokes, but I had a lot of jokes about. And I started in, and he was not happy. And after about 3 jokes, I went into my act. I dropped it, and later, and he was really angry. And later, I felt terrible, and the committee was like, "They were hilarious, Jan, and we gave you permission to do that." He's from another country. He didn't understand the culture of joking about the company. My jokes were tasteful. They weren't, dirty, and they weren't mean-spirited or anything. But they just the committee understood that, and they hired me to do that, but they did not get approval from their CEO, and so that was a little bit of awkwardness.
So maybe in his culture there are things like like you said, Mexicans, maybe they don't joke about those things, or about companies.
You don't joke about a company. You don't joke in his culture.
You.
They don't. You don't make fun of. And I wasn't. Again, it wasn't mean spirited. It wasn't dirty jokes. It wasn't anything bad. But what do you do? So lesson
cultural differences.
Yeah, cultural differences for sure.
Yeah. So Jen, what is one last tip you can share with us on how to be better in injecting humor in our keynotes?
I would say do the humor that you think is funny. You will sell it more. You'll have fun doing it. Start small. Try a few jokes, 1 or 2, because comedians start with 3 minutes at an open mic. We don't start with 45 or 60 minutes because we can't hold the audience that long. So just start out with a little bit of humor and add it in there, and you'll get some good reaction. You'll have people laughing, and you'll kind of get that bug to do it some more. So I would say start small and do the humor you think is funny that you truly do. You'll sell it. You'll feel good doing it, and you'll enjoy doing it.
Mm-hmm. A lot of our listeners are mostly tech people.
Okay.
And they are classified as nerds by our society. Do you think they can also find humor in being a nerd?
Yes, yes, yes. I do a lot of humor with tech. I do a lot of humor keynotes at tech companies. They have a great sense of humor. They really do. And yes, of course. And they aren't just guys and girls sitting there on coding on a computer. They're they've got a good sense of humor. So try it, do it, have some fun with it. And again, don't worry so much about bombing, or just have fun, do it for yourself sometimes, and bring people on board for the ride. Get them. Don't worry, don't wait for permission for people to say, oh, you can be funny, you can use humor. Just do it, try it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being on the show today. This has been so much fun. I love the humor of the conversation itself. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And can I plug my website, or is that?
Yes, I'm about to ask you for your socials before you go. Yeah, no, go ahead.
Perfect. Website is theworklady.com. Theworklady.com. I do a lot of office humor, and nobody can spell McInnis. So,
Okay.
and then social media would be jan.mcinnis, MCINNIS, that's Instagram, and janfans.com. Go to that, and that's my Facebook business page.
Okay, I will write it on the show notes too so that they get the spelling of McInnis. That's right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day. Bye.
You too. Take care.
Okay. Bye.